property rights are biblical. Property rights are not a new concept. And if you're interested in this, I don't have a lot of time to spend, but we have multiple papers on our website that deal with biblical perspectives of private property. And basically the story is this, that when we're given dominion over the earth, this is where property rights are born. Property rights help us exercise stewardship. And this dominion is both reinforced and protected in the 8th and 10th commandments. So, you shall not steal implies that you own something. You can't steal something. Nothing can be stolen from you if you don't own anything. Coveting is the same. If there were no property rights that were legitimate, then everything would be shared in common. There would really be no ownership. Okay, so property rights are given to us. I mean, God is sovereign over everything. Ultimately, it's all his. Property rights are a mechanism that help us live out our call to flourishing. And they're so important that they're mentioned in 2 of the 10 commandments. So this is not something to be taken lightly. Again, something we have to be educated on. And limited government is also a biblical concept. There's differences from the Old Testament to the New Testament. And, I don't have a lot of time to spend on what the evangelical left makes a lot of claims about different scriptural passages that suggest that property rights are not important or that you can centrally plan to allocate resources. But we have, again, papers written by theologians on our websites. One takes on Acts 2-5 head on and suggests that in the early church, because people were sharing all things on an as-needed basis, is not what we call didactic in Scripture. So it's not a command that that's how we operate society. It's narrative, suggesting that that was a response of those people in that moment. And, not to simplify, we probably are going to be called to do hard things and share our resources with people in need. But that's very different. Sharing with, people who are in need is very different than mandating government redistribution of property. Leviticus is also the story of Jubilee. This is also where the evangelical left tends to suggest that property rights are not absolute. And so we have more research that suggests that it actually is a form of contracting and that it protects property rights rather than undermines them. So I think, again, when we're talking to our peers, if we're going to be good articulators of liberty and freedom and we're coming from a Christian perspective, we've got to read up on these things and understand where, the other side is coming from, but really get into the Scripture yourself. Don't believe it because I told you. Believe it because it's right. And to do that, you've got to do some research. And there's New Testament and Old Testament distinctions as well. I think, just to talk about Israel for a second, that was a theocracy, and it more reflects a covenant relationship that a church would have with members of its community, rather than a narrative for how to run a non-theocratic state, which is what we currently reside in, right? And then if you look at Romans and other parts of the Old Testament, you see that there were prophets, Romans is New Testament, the prophets in the Old Testament, in Amos particularly, were berating the pagan rulers for violating negative rights versus advocating for positive rights, for the role of governors. That's particularly important. And then Romans, really takes time to talk about the distinction between the state and other aspects of society. So the state has some very limited role and should not usurp that role. So again, we could have a whole talk just on that slide, but there's more where that came from if you're interested. But what I'm kind of summarizing here is that limited government it's limited because God understands us in ways better than we understand ourselves, right? He knows what we need to achieve this flourishing that he's calling us to. So limited government and private property rights are ways that we get to more economic freedom, to more flourishing, to better quality of life and higher standards of living. So this is really about stewardship. So economic freedom helps us understand how to be better stewards, and in this, we get justice. Okay, so I want to turn the idea of social justice on its head. Justice is allowing people the opportunity to be whatever God has called them to be. We don't know on the outside what that's going to be.